In the grand halls of Valdoria Palace, where centuries-old portraits watch with knowing eyes and whispered secrets echo through marble corridors, a truth so devastating lies buried that it could topple an entire kingdom. For 23 years, Prince Alexander has lived believing he was the rightful heir to the throne, but on a rain-soaked evening in November, a dying servant's confession would shatter everything he thought he knew about his identity, his family, and the crown that was never meant to be his. What happens when a person destined to rule discovers they are living a lie? What happens when a kingdom's future rests on a secret so dangerous that people have died to protect it? And what happens when the truth finally emerges from the shadows, threatening not just a monarchy, but the very fabric of a nation? This is the story of how one young man's quest for truth would ignite a revolution, expose a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of power, and force him to choose between the comfortable lie he had always known and the dangerous truth that could either destroy him or set an entire kingdom free. In a world where loyalty is currency and betrayal is punishable by death, Prince Alexander is about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who shares your blood, and the most precious ally is the one you never saw coming. The storm that battered Valdoria Palace on that November evening seemed to mirror the chaos about to unfold within its ancient walls. Prince Alexander Montclair stood at the tall windows of his private study, watching lightning illuminate the sprawling gardens below. At 23, he possessed the refined features and commanding presence expected of future royalty. But tonight, something felt different. An unsettling tension had been building for weeks, like the electrical charge before a thunderstorm. The knock on his door came softly, barely audible above the wind. Alexander turned, expecting to see his personal secretary Marcus with the evening reports. Instead, a figure hunched with age and wrapped in a dark cloak stood in the doorway. It was Eleanor Whitmore, the head housekeeper who had served the royal family for over 40 years. Her usually stern demeanor had been replaced by something Alexander had never seen before: fear. "Your Highness," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I must speak with you. Alone." Alexander dismissed his guards with a wave, noting how Eleanor's weathered hands shook as she closed the door behind them. She had been like a grandmother to him throughout his childhood, the only person in the palace who ever dared to scold him when he misbehaved. To see her so distressed sent a chill through him that had nothing to do with the November cold. "Eleanor, what is wrong? You look as though you have seen a ghost." The old woman's eyes filled with tears. "Perhaps I have, Your Highness. Perhaps I have been living with ghosts for far too long." She moved closer, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. "There are things you must know. Things about your birth, about who you really are." Alexander felt the ground shift beneath him. "What do you mean?" Eleanor reached into her cloak and withdrew a small, ornate wooden box. Her fingers traced its surface lovingly before she held it out to him. 23 years ago, I made a promise to your mother, the late Queen Isabella. I swore I would take certain secrets to my grave. But I am dying, Your Highness. The physicians give me mere weeks, and I cannot bear the thought of leaving this world with such a burden on my soul. The prince's hands trembled as he accepted the box. Inside, wrapped in faded silk, were several items. A birth certificate bearing a name he did not recognize, a locket containing a portrait of a woman who was not Queen Isabella, and letters written in his mother's distinctive handwriting. "Read them," Eleanor urged. "But prepare yourself, my dear boy. What you will learn will change everything." Alexander's eyes scanned the first letter, and with each word, his world crumbled. The woman he had called mother, Queen Isabella, had been unable to bear children. In desperation to secure the succession and save her marriage to King Frederick, she had arranged for a secret adoption. Alexander was not her son by blood, but the child of a common servant girl who had died in childbirth. "This cannot be true," Alexander whispered, but even as he spoke the words, pieces of a puzzle he had never known existed began falling into place. His unusual height, so different from his supposed father. His green eyes, when both the king and queen had brown ones. The way certain courtiers sometimes looked at him with expressions he could never quite interpret. Eleanor nodded sadly. "It is true, Your Highness. You are not of royal blood. You are the son of Catherine Mills, a kitchen maid who caught the eye of a visiting diplomat. When she died bringing you into this world, Queen Isabella saw an opportunity. You were presented as her own child, born during a carefully orchestrated retreat to the summer palace. Only a handful of people ever knew the truth. Who else knows? Alexander demanded, his mind racing with the implications. Most are dead now, Eleanor replied. The physician who attended the birth, the midwife, 2 trusted ladies-in-waiting. They all took substantial payments and signed documents swearing them to secrecy. But there is one other who knows, and that is why I must warn you now. The thunder crashed overhead as Eleanor continued her devastating revelation. Your cousin, Prince Sebastian, has always suspected something. He was clever, even as a child, asking questions about your birth that made everyone uncomfortable. If he were to discover proof of what I have just told you, he would not hesitate to use it to claim the throne for himself. Prince Sebastian, Alexander's cousin, was only 2 years younger, but had always carried himself with the bitter resentment of a man who believed he deserved more. As the son of King Frederick's younger brother, Sebastian was currently second in line to the throne. With Alexander's legitimacy in question, Sebastian would become the rightful heir. There is more, Eleanor said, her voice growing weaker with emotion. The diplomat who fathered you is not just any visitor to our court. He was Prince Victor Kozlov of Astoria, our neighboring kingdom. This makes you not just illegitimate, but potentially a foreign agent in Asturian eyes. If this truth were to come to light, it could be seen as an act of deception that might justify war. Alexander sank into his chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was learning. Not only was his entire identity a lie, but his very existence could be considered a threat to national security. The weight of the crown he had been trained to wear since childhood suddenly felt crushing. Why are you telling me this now? He asked. Why not take this secret to your grave, as you promised? Eleanor's eyes blazed with a fierce determination that reminded him of the woman who had helped raise him. Because you deserve to know who you are, and because dark forces are already moving against you. 3 nights ago, I overheard Prince Sebastian speaking with Lord Chancellor Harrison in the wine cellars. They mentioned documents, investigations, and the need to remove obstacles to Sebastian's rightful place on the throne. The implications hit Alexander like a physical blow. If Sebastian was indeed investigating his legitimacy and had the support of the Lord Chancellor, one of the most powerful men in the kingdom, then Alexander was in immediate danger. In Valdoria, challenges to royal succession had historically been settled with poison, daggers, and convenient accidents. What would you have me do? Alexander asked. If what you say is true, then I have no right to the throne. Perhaps it would be better for the kingdom if Sebastian were to rule. No. Eleanor's voice cracked like a whip. I have watched you grow from a child into a man, and I have seen your heart, your highness. You care about the people of this kingdom in a way that Prince Sebastian never will. Royal blood or not, you have the soul of a true king. More importantly, you have been groomed for this role your entire life. To simply step aside now would throw the kingdom into chaos. She leaned forward, gripping his hands with surprising strength. But there is something else you must know. Your real father, Prince Victor, is still alive. He now sits on the throne of Astoria as King Victor III. He never knew about you, but if you were to make contact with him, you might find an ally in the struggles to come. Alexander's mind reeled. Not only did he have a living father, but that father was the king of Valdoria's most important neighbor. The political implications were staggering. An alliance between the kingdoms had been discussed for years, but never materialized due to old grievances and territorial disputes. I need time to think, Alexander said, carefully placing the documents back in the box. These revelations change everything. Eleanor nodded and slowly rose to her feet. Time is a luxury you may not have, Your Highness. Trust no one completely, but watch especially carefully around Prince Sebastian and Lord Chancellor Harrison. They have been meeting frequently, and each time I see them together, Sebastian looks more confident and Harrison more calculating. As the old housekeeper moved toward the door, Alexander called after her. Eleanor, who else might know about these meetings between Sebastian and the Chancellor? She paused, considering. Captain Marcus Holloway of the Royal Guard has been assigned to escort Sebastian more frequently. If anyone would know the details of their conversations, it would be him. But be careful. Captain Holloway's loyalty has always been to whoever he believes holds the real power. After Eleanor left, Alexander sat alone in his study, staring at the box that contained the destruction of everything he had believed about himself. Outside, the storm continued to rage, and he found himself wondering if it was an omen of the tempest about to engulf his life. He thought about his childhood, searching for clues he might have missed. There had always been something slightly distant about Queen Isabella's affection for him, a formality that he had attributed to royal protocol, but now understood as the careful performance of a woman who loved him, but could never forget that he was not her blood. King Frederick had been warmer, but Frederick had died when Alexander was only 15, taking any secrets he might have shared to his grave. The more Alexander considered Eleanor's words, the more he realized that his entire life had been built on a foundation of lies. Every lesson about royal duty, every speech about his noble bloodline, every moment of pride in his heritage had been based on deception. Yet, as the initial shock began to fade, he found himself thinking not about what he had lost, but about what he might do with this knowledge. If Prince Sebastian was indeed plotting against him, then Alexander needed allies, and he needed them quickly. The revelation about his true parentage was dangerous, but it also opened possibilities he had never considered. A secret alliance with Astoria could strengthen Valdoria's position significantly, especially if King Victor proved willing to acknowledge a son he had never known he had. But first, Alexander needed to confirm Eleanor's warnings about Sebastian's activities. If his cousin was indeed planning to expose his illegitimacy, Alexander needed to be prepared with a strategy that went beyond simply denying the truth. He needed to turn this weakness into a strength, and he needed to do it before Sebastian could make his move. As the clock in his study chimed midnight, Prince Alexander made a decision that would change the course of his life and the fate of the kingdom. He would not run from this truth, nor would he simply accept defeat. Instead, he would use what he had learned to forge a new path forward, one that might ultimately prove that leadership was about more than the circumstances of one's birth. The game for the throne of Aldoria was about to begin in earnest, and Alexander intended to win it, not by hiding from his true identity, but by embracing it completely. The storm outside was finally beginning to calm, but the storm within the palace walls was just getting started. 3 days had passed since Eleanor's revelation, and Prince Alexander had barely slept. He spent his time carefully observing the palace dynamics with new eyes, noticing subtle changes in behavior that now took on sinister meaning. Prince Sebastian had indeed been more visible around the palace, engaging in lengthy conversations with various courtiers and officials. Most disturbing of all, Lord Chancellor Harrison had requested several private audiences with King Frederick's old advisors, meetings that Alexander was conspicuously excluded from. Alexander knew he needed more information before making any moves. That morning, he decided to approach Captain Marcus Holloway, the guard Eleanor had mentioned. Holloway was a career soldier in his 40s, known for his unwavering discipline and pragmatic approach to palace politics. If Sebastian was planning something, Holloway would likely know about it. Alexander found the captain conducting morning drills with the palace guard in the main courtyard. The sight of soldiers training in formation reminded him that any conflict over succession would ultimately be decided by who controlled the military. This realization made his conversation with Holloway even more crucial. "Captain Holloway," Alexander called out as the drill concluded. "A word, if you please." The captain approached and offered a crisp salute. "Your Highness, how may I serve you?" Alexander gestured toward a private alcove away from the other guards. "I have some concerns about security matters that require your discretion." Holloway's expression remained neutral, but Alexander noticed a slight tension in the man's posture. "Of course, Your Highness. What troubles you?" "I have noticed increased activity among certain courtiers lately. Late-night meetings, hushed conversations, unusual patterns of movement throughout the palace. As future king, I am naturally concerned about any potential threats to stability." The captain's eyes flickered with something that might have been respect or calculation. "Your Highness is very observant. There have indeed been some unusual patterns of activity recently." Alexander felt his pulse quicken. "What kind of patterns?" Holloway glanced around carefully before responding. "Prince Sebastian has been requesting extended security details for meetings that are not officially recorded in the court calendar. He has also been corresponding with individuals outside the palace, including some foreign contacts, though I cannot say more about the nature of these communications." "Foreign contacts?" Alexander kept his voice level despite his growing alarm. "Diplomatic pouches have been arriving for Prince Sebastian from various kingdoms, including Astoria. This is unusual, as foreign correspondence typically goes through the Chancellor's office first. Alexander's mind raced. Sebastian was already in contact with Historia. Did this mean he knew about Alexander's true parentage and was already negotiating with King Victor? Or was Sebastian pursuing some other alliance that would strengthen his position? Captain, I need to ask you a direct question, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Do you believe Prince Sebastian poses any threat to the current succession? Holloway was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing his words carefully. Your Highness, my oath is to protect the rightful ruler of Valdoria and maintain the stability of the kingdom. If I believe that the current succession was in jeopardy, it would be my duty to inform you. The careful phrasing told Alexander everything he needed to know. Holloway suspected something, but was not yet ready to declare his allegiance definitively. This was both encouraging and dangerous. It meant the captain was honest enough not to make promises he might not keep, but also that Alexander could not count on his unquestioned support. I appreciate your candor, Captain. I may need to discuss these security concerns with you again soon. I remain at your service, Your Highness. After leaving Holloway, Alexander made his way to the palace library, a vast repository of historical documents and genealogical records. If he was going to confront the truth of his parentage, he needed to understand all the implications. He also needed to research the legal precedents for succession challenges in Valdoria. Lady Catherine Fairfax, the palace librarian, greeted him with surprise. Your Highness, how unexpected. How may I assist you? I am researching historical precedents for irregular successions in our kingdom's past. Are there documented cases where the rightful heir was challenged or where circumstances of birth affected succession? Lady Catherine's scholarly enthusiasm was immediately apparent. Oh yes, Your Highness. Our kingdom has quite a complex history in that regard. The most famous case would be the succession crisis of 1642, when King Edmund's legitimacy was questioned due to rumors about his mother's conduct. What was the outcome of that crisis? King Edmund ultimately retained the throne, but only after proving his legitimacy through a trial by combat and securing the support of the military and the church. However, the controversy weakened his reign significantly and led to several rebellions. Alexander found this information both encouraging and sobering. It suggested that questions of legitimacy could be overcome, but at great cost to the kingdom's stability. Are there any cases where someone of foreign parentage successfully claimed the throne? Lady Catherine looked thoughtful. Not in Valdoria specifically, but in neighboring kingdoms, yes. In fact, mixed heritage has sometimes been viewed as advantageous for diplomatic purposes. The key seems to be transparency and the support of powerful allies. Alexander spent the next several hours studying historical documents, taking careful notes on legal precedents and successful strategies for managing succession crises. What he learned was that legitimacy, while important, was not always the decisive factor. Military support, popular approval, and foreign alliances often mattered more than bloodline alone. As evening approached, Alexander returned to his chambers to find an unexpected visitor waiting for him. Princess Sophia Blackthorne, the daughter of a powerful neighboring duke, sat gracefully in his sitting room. At 21, Sophia was known throughout the court for her intelligence and political acumen, as well as her striking beauty. She had been suggested as a potential bride for Alexander several times, though no formal betrothal had been arranged. Princess Sophia, Alexander said, genuinely surprised. This is unexpected. Sophia rose and offered a slight curtsy, but her expression was serious rather than ceremonial. Your Highness, I hope you will forgive the impropriety of this unannounced visit, but I have information that you need to hear immediately. Alexander gestured for her to sit, his pulse quickening. Please speak freely. My father has been contacted by Prince Sebastian's representatives. They have suggested a marriage alliance between our houses, with Sebastian as the prospective groom. Sophia's blue eyes met his directly. The timing of this proposal, coming so soon after Sebastian's increased political activity, suggests that he may be positioning himself for a challenge to your succession. Alexander felt the walls closing in around him. Sebastian was not just gathering information and foreign allies. He was actively building a coalition of domestic support through marriage alliances. What was your father's response? He asked. He has not yet given an answer, which is why I am here. My father values stability and legitimacy above all else. If he believed that your position was secure, he would never consider Sebastian's proposal. But if he suspects that your succession might be challenged successfully, Sophia left the implication unfinished. Alexander realized that Sophia was offering him something invaluable, advance warning and possibly an ally. But she was also making it clear that her family support was not guaranteed. Princess, may I speak with complete honesty? I would prefer nothing less, Your Highness. Alexander made a calculated decision. If he was going to survive the coming crisis, he needed allies who were fully informed about the situation. There are aspects of my position that have recently come to light, which may indeed make my succession vulnerable to challenge. I cannot share all the details, but I can tell you that Prince Sebastian may have legitimate grounds for questioning my right to the throne. Sophia's expression did not change, which told Alexander that she had already suspected something along these lines. I see. And what do you intend to do about this situation? I intend to fight for the throne, but not based on hiding from whatever challenges Sebastian may raise. I believe that effective leadership matters more than the circumstances of one's birth, and I am prepared to prove that to the kingdom. Sophia was quiet for a moment, clearly evaluating his words carefully. Your Highness, if you're facing a serious challenge to your legitimacy, then you will need more than courage and good intentions. You will need a strategy that addresses the political realities of such a crisis. What would you suggest? First, you need to secure military support before Sebastian makes his move. Captain Holloway seems honorable, but he will ultimately side with whoever he believes can maintain stability. You need to demonstrate that you can provide that stability even in the face of controversy. Alexander nodded. This aligned with his own thinking. Second, Sophia continued, you need to turn your potential weakness into a strength. If there are questions about your heritage, perhaps there are also opportunities in that heritage that Sebastian cannot match. This comment struck directly at the heart of Alexander's situation. His Asturian parentage could indeed be turned into an advantage if handled correctly. Finally, Sophia said, you need allies who are committed to supporting you regardless of whatever Sebastian reveals. Marriage alliances, trade agreements, mutual defense pacts. You need to make yourself indispensable to enough powerful people that removing you would be more costly than keeping you. Alexander found himself impressed by Sophia's political analysis. And where would House Blackthorn stand in such a scenario? Sophia smiled, and for the first time that evening, her expression showed warmth rather than calculation. That depends on whether you are offering me a more compelling proposal than Prince Sebastian has. The implication was clear. Sophia was suggesting a marriage alliance between them, one that would secure her father's powerful house for Alexander's cause, while also demonstrating his ability to form crucial domestic partnerships. Such an alliance would need to be based on more than political necessity, Alexander said carefully. Of course, Sophia replied. But political necessity can provide a foundation for relationships that grow into something more meaningful over time. More importantly, such an alliance would signal to other noble houses that you are serious about building a stable future for the kingdom. Alexander realized that Sophia was offering him exactly what he needed, a powerful ally who understood the political realities he faced and was willing to help him navigate them. But accepting her offer would also commit him to a path that there would be no backing down from. I need time to consider your proposal, he said. Time is something we may not have much of, Sophia replied. My sources suggest that Sebastian plans to make his move within the next 2 weeks, possibly at the Harvest Festival, when the entire court will be assembled. The Harvest Festival. Alexander had forgotten about the kingdom's most important annual celebration, scheduled for the following week. It would indeed be the perfect opportunity for Sebastian to make a public challenge to his succession, surrounded by all the most important nobles and officials in the kingdom. If Sebastian does intend to act at the festival, then I need to be prepared with my own announcement, Alexander said. Sophia stood to leave. Your Highness, whatever you decide about my proposal, please remember that doing nothing is also a choice, and often the worst one possible. Sebastian is counting on you being paralyzed by uncertainty while he builds his coalition. After Sophia left, Alexander sat alone in his chambers, staring out at the palace gardens where he had played as a child, believing himself to be the rightful heir to the throne. Now, less than a week before the Harvest Festival, he faced the most crucial decision of his life. He could accept Sophia's proposal, securing a powerful ally and demonstrating his commitment to fighting for the crown. He could also begin making contact with his true father in Astoria, potentially gaining foreign support that would outweigh any domestic challenges. Or he could step aside gracefully, allowing Sebastian to take the throne without a devastating succession crisis. But, as Alexander considered his options, he found himself thinking about Eleanor's words about having the soul of a true king. He thought about the people of Valdoria, who deserved a ruler who would put their welfare above personal ambition. And he thought about Sebastian, whose bitterness and entitlement had been apparent even as children. By the time the sun rose the next morning, Prince Alexander had made his decision. He would not only fight for the throne, he would win it. And he would begin by accepting Princess Sophia's alliance, and using the Harvest Festival not as the stage for his downfall, but as the moment when he seized control of his own destiny. The morning after his conversation with Princess Sophia, Alexander wasted no time putting his plan into action. He sent word requesting an immediate private audience with her, and by midday, they were walking together through the palace rose gardens, away from prying ears and watching eyes. "Princess Sophia," Alexander began, "I have given your proposal serious consideration, and I believe an alliance between our houses would serve both our interests and the greater good of the kingdom." Sophia's smile was both pleased and knowing. "I'm glad you have reached that conclusion, Your Highness. When shall we make the announcement?" "At the Harvest Festival, immediately before Sebastian can make whatever move he is planning. We will announce our betrothal and present it as a celebration of unity and strength for Valdoria's future." "A sound strategy," Sophia agreed. "It will force Sebastian to either proceed with his challenge despite your strengthened position, or delay his plans while he reassesses the situation." Alexander nodded, then took a deep breath before sharing the next part of his plan. "There is something else I must tell you, something that will affect our alliance and your family's position. The challenge Sebastian intends to make concerns the legitimacy of my birth." He watched Sophia's face carefully as he explained Eleanor's revelations about his true parentage. To her credit, she listened without interruption, her expression thoughtful rather than shocked. "Your father is King Victor of Astoria," she said when he finished. "That is not the weakness Sebastian believes it to be. That is a tremendous opportunity." Alexander felt relief flood through him. "You truly see it that way? Your Highness, Valdoria has been trying to secure a meaningful alliance with Astoria for decades. If you are King Victor's son, acknowledged or not, you represent the possibility of uniting our kingdoms in a way that would make us the most powerful force in the region." Sophia's political mind was working rapidly, and Alexander could see her calculating the possibilities. "More importantly," she continued, "Sebastian cannot match this advantage. His legitimacy may be unquestioned, but his bloodline offers no strategic value beyond our own borders." "Then, you believe we should make contact with King Victor?" "Absolutely, but carefully. We need to approach him in a way that serves both kingdoms' interests. I suggest we craft a message that focuses on the political benefits of acknowledging you, while leaving the personal aspects for later discussion." Alexander marveled at how quickly Sophia had grasped the complexities of the situation and developed a strategy. "What do you have in mind?" "My family has trade connections with Astoria. We can use those relationships to arrange a discreet meeting with King Victor's representatives. The message should emphasize that acknowledging you as his son would secure Astoria a powerful ally in Valdoria, while also strengthening your position here." They spent the next hour crafting their approach, with Sophia's knowledge of international diplomacy proving invaluable. By the time they parted, they had developed a comprehensive strategy that addressed both the domestic and foreign aspects of Alexander's situation. That evening, Alexander met again with Captain Holloway, this time with a more direct agenda. "Captain, I need to know where your loyalties lie, and I need to know now." Holloway straightened, recognizing the seriousness in Alexander's tone. "My loyalty is to the rightful ruler of Valdoria and the stability of the kingdom, Your Highness, even if that ruler's legitimacy were challenged." "Legitimacy is determined by more than bloodline alone, Your Highness. It is earned through leadership, proven through action, and maintained through the support of the people and the military." Alexander felt encouraged by this response. "Captain, I have reason to believe that Prince Sebastian intends to challenge my succession, possibly at the Harvest Festival. I need to know that I can count on the Royal Guard support if such a challenge is made." Holloway was quiet for a long moment. "Your Highness, if you can demonstrate that you have the support of the nobility and the backing to maintain stability, the Guard will support you. But if Sebastian's challenge appears likely to succeed, my duty is to prevent civil war, even if that means accepting a change in succession. It was an honest answer, if not the unqualified support Alexander had hoped for. I understand. What would you need to see to be confident in supporting my claim? Evidence of broad political support, preferably including international backing. Proof that you can maintain order and stability even in the face of controversy. And assurance that supporting you would not lead to a prolonged conflict that tears the kingdom apart. Alexander nodded. Holloway's requirements aligned perfectly with the strategy he and Sophia had developed. You shall have all of those things, Captain. I ask only that you give me the opportunity to provide them before making any final decisions about where your loyalties lie. That is fair, Your Highness. Over the next 3 days, Alexander and Sophia worked tirelessly to build their coalition. Through her family's connections, they reached out to King Victor's court, sending a carefully worded message that requested a secret meeting to discuss matters of mutual benefit to both kingdoms. They also began approaching other noble houses, gauging support, and offering incentives for loyalty. The response to their efforts was mixed, but encouraging. Several major houses indicated they would support Alexander if he could prove his position was secure. Others remained uncommitted, clearly waiting to see how the situation developed. Most importantly, no one explicitly declared for Sebastian, suggesting that his coalition was not as strong as he might have hoped. On the 4th day, they received an unexpected response from Astoria. King Victor himself had agreed to a secret meeting to take place 2 days before the harvest festival at Hunting Lodge on the border between the kingdoms. The message was brief but intriguing. The matter you raise has implications that require immediate discussion. Alexander felt both excitement and trepidation as he prepared for what could be the most important conversation of his life. Meeting his biological father for the first time would have been emotionally challenging under any circumstances, but doing so while seeking political alliance added layers of complexity that kept him awake at night. The journey to the border took most of a day, with Alexander traveling in disguise with only 2 trusted guards. Princess Sophia had wanted to accompany him, but they agreed it was too risky. If the meeting went badly, at least one of them needed to be back in Valdoria to manage the situation. The Hunting Lodge was a modest stone building nestled in a forest clearing, chosen specifically because it could be approached from both kingdoms without attracting attention. As Alexander's party arrived at sunset, he could see that the Astorian delegation was already there, their horses tethered nearby. Inside the lodge, a fire burned warmly in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the wooden walls. 3 men waited for him. 2 were clearly advisors or guards, but the third was unmistakably King Victor III of Astoria. At 52, King Victor was a tall, imposing man with graying hair and the same green eyes that Alexander saw in his own mirror each morning. The family resemblance was subtle but undeniable, visible in the shape of their faces and the way they both carried themselves. Your Majesty, Alexander said, offering a formal bow. Prince Alexander, Victor replied, his voice revealing nothing of his thoughts. Or should I say, my son? The directness of the statement caught Alexander off guard. You do not seem surprised by the revelation of my parentage. Victor gestured for Alexander to sit across from him at a simple wooden table. I am not. I have suspected for years that my time in Valdoria 24 years ago might have resulted in a child. When your message mentioned matters of mutual interest regarding bloodlines and alliances, it confirmed suspicions I have harbored for some time. Alexander felt a strange mixture of relief and disappointment. Relief that Victor seemed to accept the truth of their relationship, but disappointment that this potential father figure spoke with such political calculation rather than emotional warmth. Why did you never make inquiries about Catherine Mills? Alexander asked. Victor's expression softened slightly. Catherine was a remarkable young woman, and I cared for her deeply during my stay in Valdoria. But I was already married, and any acknowledgement of our relationship would have created a diplomatic crisis. When I heard of her death in childbirth, I assumed the child had died as well. And now that you know I survived, now I find myself in a position where acknowledging a son could serve both personal and political purposes. Victor leaned forward. Tell me about this succession crisis you face. Alexander explained Sebastian's apparent plans and his own strategy for maintaining the throne. Victor listened intently, occasionally asking pointed questions about military support, economic resources, and foreign relationships. "You find yourself in a fascinating position," Victor said when Alexander finished. "Your cousin challenges you based on illegitimate birth. Not knowing that your true parentage actually strengthens your position significantly." "How do you mean?" Victor smiled for the first time during their conversation. An alliance between Valdoria and Astoria has been discussed for decades, but never achieved because neither kingdom wanted to appear subordinate to the other. "But if the heir to Valdoria is also my son, such an alliance becomes a family matter rather than a political submission." Alexander began to see the full implications. Joint military exercises, shared trade agreements, coordinated foreign policy. Exactly. Together, our kingdoms would be strong enough to resist pressure from the larger powers that have been trying to expand their influence in our region. Victor paused, then continued with obvious satisfaction. "More importantly for your immediate situation, Sebastian cannot offer Valdoria anything comparable to what you can provide through our relationship. Are you prepared to publicly acknowledge me as your son?" Victor considered this carefully. "I am prepared to acknowledge you as my son and heir, with the understanding that you would remain Crown Prince of Valdoria first and Asturian heir second. This would actually solve a succession problem for me as well, since my marriage has produced no children." Alexander felt the ground shift beneath him once again. Not only was he gaining a powerful ally, but he was also being offered inheritance of a second kingdom. The boy who had learned a week ago that he was illegitimate was now potentially in line for 2 thrones. "What would you require from me in return?" "A formal alliance between our kingdoms, sealed by your marriage to a bride who can help manage the diplomatic complexities of our united position. I understand you are considering Princess Sophia Blackthorn. Her family's connections would be valuable for maintaining stability during the transition." Alexander realized that Victor had done his own research into the situation, demonstrating the kind of thorough preparation that had made him a successful king. "There is one more thing," Victor continued. "I have been monitoring Prince Sebastian's activities. He has indeed been corresponding with my court, but not in the way you might expect. He has been offering to cede certain territorial rights to Astoria in exchange for support of his claim to the Valdorian throne." This revelation was devastating. Sebastian was not only challenging Alexander's legitimacy, but was also prepared to sell parts of Valdoria to foreign powers in exchange for their support. "What was your response to his overtures?" Victor's smile turned cold. "I told him I would consider his proposal. Let him continue to believe he has Asturian support. It will make his downfall at the Harvest Festival all the more complete when I publicly acknowledge you as my son instead." As their meeting concluded, Alexander felt transformed by the conversation. He had come seeking an ally and had found not only a father, but also a partner in a political strategy that would reshape the balance of power in the region. The ride back to Valdoria gave him time to process everything he had learned. Sebastian's willingness to compromise the kingdom's territorial integrity proved that he was unfit to rule, regardless of any questions about Alexander's legitimacy. More importantly, Alexander now had resources and support that Sebastian could never match. As the palace came into view, Alexander felt ready for the confrontation that awaited him at the Harvest Festival. He had built a coalition of domestic and foreign support, secured powerful marriage alliance, and discovered advantages in his heritage that more than compensated for any questions about his birth. The game for the throne was about to reach its climax, and for the first time since Eleanor's revelation, Alexander was confident that he would emerge victorious. Sebastian had been planning for weeks to destroy him, but he had no idea that his target had been building an empire. The morning of the Harvest Festival dawned crisp and clear, with golden sunlight streaming through the palace windows like a blessing from the gods themselves. Alexander stood in his chambers, being fitted for the ceremonial robes that he would wear for what could be either his greatest triumph or his ultimate downfall. The rich burgundy fabric, embroidered with a royal coat of arms, had been worn by crown princes for generations, but today it might be worn for the last time by someone of questionable royal blood. Princess Sophia arrived early, resplendent in a gown of deep emerald silk that complemented her auburn hair perfectly. Her presence brought Alexander both comfort and determination. Together, they had built something that neither Sebastian nor the Lord Chancellor had anticipated, a coalition strong enough to weather any storm. "Are you ready for this?" Sophia asked, adjusting the ceremonial sword at Alexander's side. As ready as one can be for a battle that will determine the fate of kingdoms, Alexander replied. Though I admit I never imagined a week ago that I would be fighting not just for Valdoria's throne, but potentially for the future of two nations. Sophia smiled, and Alexander saw both affection and fierce determination in her expression. Whatever happens today, we face it together. That alone gives us an advantage Sebastian cannot match. A soft knock interrupted their conversation. Captain Holloway entered, his expression grave but resolute. Your Highness, I have news that requires immediate attention. Alexander felt his pulse quicken. What has happened? Prince Sebastian has called an emergency session of the Royal Council for this afternoon, just before the main festival celebrations. He has claimed there are matters of urgent national security that must be addressed before the Crown can participate in any public ceremonies. This was Sebastian's move. Alexander had expected it, but the reality still sent adrenaline coursing through his veins. What is the nature of these urgent matters? He has not specified, but Lord Chancellor Harrison has been seen carrying several ancient legal texts and what appear to be genealogical documents. Additionally, 3 members of the Royal Council who have been absent from court for months have returned unexpectedly. Alexander recognized the significance immediately. Sebastian had been building his case methodically, ensuring he would have both the evidence and the votes necessary to challenge the succession successfully. Captain, where does the Royal Guard stand? Holloway straightened. Your Highness, after observing the political maneuvering of recent weeks and considering the character of those involved, the Guard stands with you. We have seen your commitment to the kingdom's welfare and your efforts to strengthen our position through legitimate alliances. By contrast, we have also learned of certain compromises that Prince Sebastian appears willing to make that would not serve Valdoria's interests. Alexander felt a surge of relief. Having military support was crucial, but he was curious about Holloway's reference to Sebastian's compromises. What compromises do you mean? Intelligence has reached us about Prince Sebastian's communications with foreign powers. Territorial concessions, trade agreements that favor external interests over our own people. Promises that suggest he views the crown as something to be bargained with rather than held in trust for the kingdom. Sophia stepped forward. Captain, can this intelligence be presented as evidence? Some of it can be, Your Highness. We have intercepted several documents that paint a clear picture of Prince Sebastian's willingness to sacrifice Valdorian interests for foreign support. Alexander felt the pieces of his strategy falling into place. Then, we shall let Sebastian present his case first and respond with revelations of our own. But first, I need you to ensure that certain invited guests are admitted to the Royal Council chamber. Alexander handed Holloway a sealed letter. King Victor of Astoria and his delegation should arrive within the hour. They are to be granted immediate access and provided with appropriate honors. Holloway's eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded. It shall be done, Your Highness. After the captain left, Alexander and Sophia spent the remaining time before the council session reviewing their strategy one final time. They had agreed that Alexander would allow Sebastian to present his challenge fully before responding, both to demonstrate confidence and to ensure that Sebastian committed himself completely to his course of action. Remember, Sophia said as they prepared to leave for the council chamber, Sebastian believes he holds all the advantages. His confidence will make him careless. As they walked through the palace corridors toward the royal council chamber, Alexander noticed the unusual number of courtiers and nobles who had gathered to witness the proceedings. Word had spread that something significant was about to happen, and the entire court seemed to be holding its breath. The royal council chamber was a magnificent room with high vaulted ceilings and walls lined with portraits of past kings. The long oak table where the council conducted its business had been witness to centuries of crucial decisions. But today, it would host a confrontation that could reshape the kingdom's future. Prince Sebastian was already seated when Alexander arrived, flanked by Lord Chancellor Harrison and several other supporters. Sebastian's expression was confident to the point of smugness, and he nodded to Alexander with the kind of condescending politeness that barely concealed his anticipation. "Brother," Sebastian said as Alexander took his seat at the head of the table, "I trust you are prepared for what promises to be a most enlightening discussion." "I am prepared for whatever truth needs to be revealed," Alexander replied evenly. Lord Chancellor Harrison called the emergency session to order, his elderly voice carrying the weight of decades of legal authority. "We are gathered today because Prince Sebastian has raised matters of urgent importance regarding the succession and the security of the realm." Sebastian stood, clearly relishing his moment. "Honorable counselors, what I am about to reveal will shock you. But it is information that can no longer be hidden if we are to preserve the integrity of the crown." He gestured dramatically toward a stack of documents on the table. "I have here evidence that Prince Alexander, our supposed heir, is not the legitimate son of King Frederick and Queen Isabella." A murmur of shock rippled through the chamber, though Alexander noticed that several counselors seemed less surprised than others. Clearly, rumors had been circulating. Sebastian continued, his voice growing stronger with confidence. "These documents, obtained through careful investigation, prove that Queen Isabella was unable to bear children and that Prince Alexander is, in fact, the bastard son of a kitchen servant and an unknown father." Alexander remained calm, watching as Sebastian presented birth certificates, medical records, and witness testimonies that painted a damning picture of deception and illegitimacy. The evidence was thorough and convincing. Eleanor's box had contained only a portion of the documents that existed. "Furthermore," Sebastian declared, "I have evidence that this deception has put our kingdom at risk. The true identity of Prince Alexander's father has never been established, raising questions about foreign influence and potential threats to our security." Lord Chancellor Harrison nodded gravely. "These are serious allegations, Prince Sebastian. What resolution do you propose?" "I propose that Prince Alexander's illegitimate status disqualifies him from succession, making me the rightful heir to the throne. Additionally, I believe immediate action is necessary to secure our kingdom's safety and establish proper alliances with our neighbors." Sebastian gestured toward another set of documents. "I have already begun negotiations with Astoria and other neighboring kingdoms to ensure a smooth transition and to address any security concerns that may arise from this revelation." Alexander felt it was time to respond. He stood slowly, projecting calm confidence despite the magnitude of the moment. "Prince Sebastian presents a compelling case," Alexander began, surprising everyone in the room. "His evidence regarding my parentage is, in fact, accurate. I am indeed not the biological son of King Frederick and Queen Isabella." The gasps that filled the chamber were audible, but Alexander continued without pause. "However, Prince Sebastian's interpretation of what this means for Valdoria is not merely incorrect. It is dangerously naive." Alexander gestured toward the chamber doors, which opened at his signal to admit King Victor and his delegation. The sight of the Asturian king entering the Valdorian royal council chamber sent shockwaves through the assembled nobles. "Your Majesty," Alexander said, bowing respectfully to Victor, "thank you for accepting my invitation to address this council." Victor stepped forward, his bearing commanding immediate attention from everyone present. "I am here because matters have been raised that directly concern both our kingdoms." Alexander turned back to the council. "Honorable counselors, I present to you King Victor III of Astoria, my biological father." The silence that followed was deafening. Sebastian's face had gone white, clearly realizing that his carefully planned revelation had been turned against him. Victor addressed the council directly. "I am here to formally acknowledge Prince Alexander as my son and heir, and to propose a formal alliance between our kingdoms that will make us the strongest political and military force in the region." Alexander resumed speaking, his voice now carrying the authority of someone who held all the winning cards. "Prince Sebastian suggests that my parentage makes me a security risk. In reality, it makes me the key to an alliance that Valdoria has sought for decades. Rather than weakening our kingdom, my heritage strengthens it immeasurably." He gestured toward Captain Holloway, who stepped forward with the intercepted documents. "Moreover, while I have been working to strengthen Valdoria through legitimate diplomatic channels, Prince Sebastian has been secretly negotiating to cede territorial rights and trading privileges to foreign powers in exchange for their support of his claim." The documents were distributed to the council members, and their expressions grew increasingly grave as they read Sebastian's compromising correspondence. "Prince Sebastian accuses me of illegitimacy," Alexander continued, "while simultaneously proving himself illegitimate as a leader by his willingness to sell our kingdom's interests for personal gain." Lord Chancellor Harrison examined the documents carefully, his legal mind processing the implications. These communications do appear to show a pattern of unauthorized diplomatic activity that could be considered treasonous. Sebastian finally found his voice, but it cracked with desperation. Those negotiations were preliminary discussions only, meant to secure the kingdom's safety during a potential succession crisis. By promising to give away our ancestral lands, Alexander asked pointedly, by offering trade concessions that would benefit foreign merchants at our people's expense? Is this the leadership you offer Valdoria? King Victor stepped forward again. I can confirm that Prince Sebastian's representatives offered significant territorial and economic concessions in exchange for Asturian support of his claim. We found these proposals so contrary to Valdoria's interests that we immediately began investigating the legitimacy of his authority to make such offers. The tide had turned completely. What Sebastian had intended as Alexander's moment of destruction had become his own downfall. Princess Sophia rose from her seat. I believe we also have another announcement that demonstrates Prince Alexander's commitment to building strength for Valdoria rather than selling it away. Alexander took Sophia's hand. I am honored to announce my betrothal to Princess Sophia Blackthorn, uniting two of Valdoria's most powerful houses in support of our kingdom's future prosperity. The combination of revelations, Alexander's Asturian heritage, Victor's acknowledgement and offer of alliance, Sebastian's treasonous negotiations, and the powerful marriage alliance with House Blackthorn, had completely transformed the political landscape. Lord Chancellor Harrison called for a formal vote of the Royal Council. All those in favor of maintaining Prince Alexander as the rightful heir to the throne of Valdoria, the vote was unanimous, with even Sebastian's former supporters abandoning him in the face of overwhelming evidence of his poor judgment. As the council session concluded, Alexander felt the weight of victory settling on his shoulders. He had not only survived Sebastian's challenge, but had emerged stronger than ever, with new alliances and a clearer sense of his own identity and purpose. The Harvest Festival celebrations that evening took on a tone of triumphant celebration rather than political uncertainty. The announcement of the betrothal and the Asturian alliance was met with genuine enthusiasm from both the nobility and the common people who recognized the strength and stability these developments promised. But Alexander knew that winning this battle was only the beginning. Now he had to prove himself worthy of the trust that had been placed in him, and he had to navigate the complex relationships he had forged while building a future that honored both his Valdorian upbringing and his Asturian heritage. The crown that he had nearly lost had been secured, but the real work of being a king was just beginning. 9 months had passed since the dramatic confrontation at the Royal Council, and the kingdom of Valdoria had been transformed in ways that few could have imagined. The great hall of the palace, once a place where whispered conspiracies took root in shadowy corners, now buzzed with the productive energy of genuine progress and innovation. Alexander stood before a massive map that dominated one wall of his private study, marking the locations of new trade routes, joint military installations, and diplomatic missions that had emerged from the alliance with Astoria. The boy who had once questioned his right to rule had become a king who was reshaping the political landscape of the entire region. A soft knock at the door interrupted his contemplation. Princess Sophia entered, but now she wore the circlet of the crown princess, their marriage having taken place 2 months earlier in a celebration that had drawn representatives from kingdoms across the continent. The union had proven to be far more than a political alliance. Their partnership had deepened into genuine affection and mutual respect. The morning reports, Sophia said, placing a leather portfolio on Alexander's desk. And I think you will find today's news particularly satisfying. Alexander opened the portfolio and smiled at the first document. The Asturian trade delegation has exceeded all projections for the quarter. Our joint ventures are generating more revenue than either kingdom achieved independently. More importantly, Sophia added, the border territories that Sebastian was prepared to cede are now generating unprecedented prosperity through cooperative development rather than surrender. Alexander nodded, reflecting on how completely the situation had reversed. Where Sebastian had seen weakness to be sold away, Alexander and Victor had found strength to be developed together. A more urgent knock interrupted their conversation. Captain Holloway entered, his expression serious but not alarmed. Your Majesty, we have received an important communication from the prison. Alexander looked up sharply. Prince Sebastian had been confined to a comfortable but secure prison in the palace's east wing following his conviction for unauthorized diplomatic activity and attempted usurpation. Though Alexander had chosen mercy over the traditional death sentence for treason, Sebastian remained a constant reminder of how quickly political situations could change. "What does my cousin want?" Alexander asked. "He has requested a private audience with you, Your Majesty. He claims to have information about ongoing threats to the kingdom that require immediate attention." Alexander exchanged a glance with Sophia. They had both expected that Sebastian would eventually attempt to bargain for better treatment or early release, but the timing seemed significant. "What kind of threats?" Sophia asked. Holloway consulted his notes. "He has been deliberately vague, but he mentions foreign elements and unfinished business from his previous negotiations. He insists that only you can properly evaluate the significance of what he knows." Alexander considered this carefully. Sebastian was intelligent and vindictive, but he was also pragmatic. If he was requesting an audience, he likely had something substantive to offer. "Very well. Arrange the meeting for this afternoon, with full security precautions. I want 2 guards present, and I want a complete record of everything that is said." After Holloway left, Sophia voiced the concern they both felt. "This could be an attempt to manipulate you. Sebastian has had months to plan whatever he intends to say." "Undoubtedly," Alexander agreed. "But he also has had months to observe how thoroughly his plans failed and how strong our position has become. If he truly has information about threats to the kingdom, I need to hear it. If he is simply scheming, I am confident we can see through whatever he has planned." That afternoon, Alexander made his way to the east wing of the palace, a section that had been converted into comfortable but secure quarters for political prisoners. Sebastian's rooms were well appointed, with books, writing materials, and even a small garden area, but the barred windows and constant guard presence made his status clear. Sebastian stood as Alexander entered, offering a bow that managed to be technically correct while conveying subtle defiance. At 21, Sebastian had always possessed a sharp intelligence that had made him dangerous, but months of confinement had given his features a harder edge. "Your Majesty," Sebastian said, his voice neutral. "Thank you for agreeing to see me. Captain Holloway indicates you have information about threats to the kingdom. I am here to listen." Sebastian gestured toward chairs arranged near the window, a surprisingly normal setting for what promised to be an unusual conversation. "Before I share what I have learned, I need you to understand something about my perspective during our conflict." Alexander remained standing, projecting authority, while Sebastian continued. "I genuinely believe that your illegitimate birth made you unfit to rule, and I acted according to that belief. I was wrong, not about the facts of your parentage, but about what those facts meant for your fitness as a leader." Alexander found himself surprised by what seemed like a genuine admission of error. "What changed your mind?" "Observation," Sebastian replied simply. "I have watched how you handled the revelation of your true heritage, how you turned potential weakness into strength, how you build alliances instead of simply inheriting them. I have also watched how the kingdom has prospered under your leadership in ways that my approach never could have achieved." Sebastian moved to his desk and withdrew a sealed letter. "More importantly, I have learned things during my confinement that suggest my own actions may have put the kingdom in danger in ways I never intended." Alexander accepted the letter, but did not open it immediately. "What kind of danger?" "When I was negotiating with various foreign powers for support of my claim, I may have revealed information about Valdorian defensive capabilities, diplomatic relationships, and internal political dynamics that certain parties have continued to exploit." Alexander felt a chill. "Which parties?" "Specifically, the Cortharian Empire. Their representatives were among the most interested in my proposals for territorial concessions, but I now realize they were gathering intelligence about our kingdom's vulnerabilities rather than seriously considering an alliance." Cortharia was the regional superpower that both Valdoria and Astoria had long feared. If they were indeed planning aggressive action based on intelligence Sebastian had provided, the threat was serious. Alexander opened the letter Sebastian had given him. Inside was a detailed account of conversations Sebastian had conducted with Cortharian agents, including information about troop deployments, fortification weaknesses, and political divisions within Valdoria that could be exploited. "How did you obtain this record of your conversations?" Alexander asked. Sebastian's expression grew grim. I kept detailed notes because I believed the information might be useful for future negotiations. I thought I was being clever, maintaining leverage for complex diplomatic situations. Instead, I was creating a roadmap for potential enemies. Alexander studied the documents carefully. If authentic, they represented a significant security breach that could indeed threaten the kingdom's safety. Why are you sharing this with me now? Sebastian was quiet for a moment before responding. Because I have come to realize that whatever our personal differences, I am still Valdorian. The kingdom's safety matters more than my wounded pride or my desires for power. He paused, then continued more quietly. Also because I have learned that the Cortharians have been in contact with other disaffected nobles who might be willing to support foreign intervention in exchange for personal advancement. This revelation was even more alarming. Alexander had assumed that Sebastian's defeat had ended the immediate threat of internal subversion. But if other nobles were now working with foreign powers, the situation was far more complex. Which nobles? Sebastian provided a list of names that included several individuals Alexander had considered reliable supporters. The betrayal was not just a security threat, but a personal blow that challenged his judgment about people he had trusted. How do you know about these contacts? Some of these individuals have attempted to recruit me for their cause, assuming that my opposition to your rule would make me a natural ally. They were wrong about my willingness to collaborate with foreign powers against Valdoria, but their approaches have given me insight into the scope of their activities. Alexander found himself in the strange position of feeling grateful to Sebastian, despite everything that had transpired between them. What do you propose we do with this information? Use it to identify and neutralize the actual threats to the kingdom while strengthening the alliances that make foreign intervention less attractive, Sebastian replied. I can provide detailed intelligence about the Cortharian agents and their local collaborators, but only if you are willing to trust me despite our history. Alexander considered this carefully. Trusting Sebastian was risky, but the information he was providing seemed too detailed and specific to be fabricated. More importantly, Sebastian's apparent change in perspective seemed genuine, though Alexander would need to verify his intelligence independently. What would you want in return for your cooperation? Nothing immediately, Sebastian said, surprising him again. I have had months to reflect on my actions and their consequences. I acted against you out of ambition and wounded pride, but the result of my failure has been better for the kingdom than my success would have been. That is a lesson in humility that I needed to learn. Sebastian moved to the window, looking out at the kingdom he had tried to rule. However, I would hope that my assistance in addressing these threats might eventually earn me the opportunity to serve Valdoria in some capacity again, perhaps in a role where my skills could benefit the kingdom rather than endanger it. Alexander found himself genuinely moved by Sebastian's apparent transformation, though he remained cautious about trusting it completely. Your cooperation in addressing these threats would certainly be taken into consideration when your case is reviewed. Over the following weeks, Sebastian's intelligence proved invaluable. Working with Captain Holloway and Astrian Security Services, Alexander was able to identify and arrest a network of Cortharian agents operating within Valdoria. More importantly, they uncovered evidence of planned military action by Cortharia that had been based partly on the intelligence Sebastian had unwittingly provided months earlier. The discovery of this threat led to an acceleration of the Valdorian-Astorian alliance, with joint military exercises and coordinated diplomatic initiatives that effectively deterred Cortharian aggression. The crisis that might have destroyed the kingdom instead became another opportunity for Alexander to demonstrate his leadership capabilities. 6 months later, Alexander stood once again in his study, but now the map on the wall showed not just trade routes and diplomatic missions, but also defensive alliances and intelligence networks that made Valdoria more secure than it had ever been. Princess Sophia, now carrying their first child, sat reading reports from across the kingdom that consistently showed prosperity and stability. A familiar knock interrupted their peaceful evening. Captain Holloway entered, but his expression carried news rather than crisis. Your Majesty, the Royal Council has completed its review of Prince Sebastian's case. Given his cooperation in exposing and neutralizing the Cortharian threat, they have recommended that he be released and appointed as ambassador to Astoria, where his diplomatic skills can serve the kingdom's interests. Alexander smiled at the recommendation. It was a solution that acknowledged Sebastian's talents while keeping him in a position where his ambitions could be channeled productively rather than destructively. What is your assessment of this proposal, Captain? I believe Prince Sebastian's transformation has been genuine, Your Majesty. More importantly, King Victor has specifically requested him for the ambassadorial position, believing that Sebastian's previous opposition to your rule will actually make him more credible as a representative of Valdorian independence. Alexander looked at Sophia, who nodded her agreement. They had discussed this possibility extensively, and both believed that giving Sebastian a meaningful role in the kingdom's future would be more beneficial than keeping him imprisoned indefinitely. Very well. Arrange for Prince Sebastian's release and appointment. But make it clear that this opportunity comes with the expectation of absolute loyalty to the crown and the kingdom. As Holloway left to implement the decision, Alexander reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought him to this point. A year ago, he had been a young man who believed he knew exactly who he was and what his future held. Eleanor's revelation had shattered that certainty, but from the wreckage, he had built something stronger and more meaningful than anything he could have inherited unchallenged. Sophia joined him at the window, and together they looked out at the kingdom that had become truly theirs through struggle rather than birthright. The lights in the village below sparkled like stars, each one representing lives that were safer and more prosperous because of the choices they had made together. Do you ever regret learning the truth about your parentage? Sophia asked. Alexander considered the question seriously. I regret the pain and uncertainty it caused initially, but I cannot regret the journey it set in motion. I am a better leader because I had to prove myself worthy of the crown rather than simply inheriting it. The kingdom is stronger because we built our alliances through mutual benefit rather than ancestral obligation. He placed his hand over hers on her growing belly. And our child will inherit not just the kingdom, but an example of how truth and courage can transform apparent weakness into genuine strength. As night fell over Valdoria, Alexander felt the deep satisfaction of a man who had faced the worst crisis of his life and emerged not just victorious, but transformed. The crown that had once seemed like his birthright had become something far more precious, a responsibility he had earned through his own choices and actions. The secret that had threatened to destroy him had instead become the foundation for a legacy that would benefit generations of Valdorians yet to be born. And in the quiet of the evening, surrounded by the people and kingdom he had fought so hard to protect, Prince Alexander Montclair knew that sometimes the most dangerous truths were also the most liberating.